Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered and said, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered and said to him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." He said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." So I guess I kind of spoiled what I'm going to start talking about, but yeah, I do have a confession to make, and confession is good for the soul, but very bad for the reputation. I don't really like Christmas, and not in some sort of like religious sense, but I've just never been a big, huge fan of Christmas. It was fun as a kid, you open presents, you get to see grandma and grandpa. If you're like me, you're gone at a different relative's house like every weekend in December, so you open your presents and Thanksgiving. When you're a kid, everything's new and exciting. But as an adult, it's all just one giant sales pitch. You're flipping through channels, and you can't just play your normal commercials in the month of December. They have to be Christmas commercials. Even if your product is the exact same thing you sell January to November, they have to have, Silent Night playing in the background or whatever. And everything just seems like one giant sales pitch, and then it's often kind of blasphemous and making fun of things that are sacred. We have the, ASPCA or the dog place, and they'll play Silent Night, because we all know the real meaning of Silent Night is, pay us $20 to euthanize your cat. But, everything is just consumerism, and it's just, it kind of wears on me, I guess. And I find that I stress out so much over what Christmas isn't that I almost miss what Christmas is. I know, like last year in particular, my family, bless them, got the great idea that we're gonna get in the Christmas spirit, and so we went. There's some guy in Tulsa, like the TV show, The Great Christmas Light Fight. Some guy in like Tulsa won that. And they're like, "Yeah, Christmas. We're gonna go see a house." So we drove like all the way to Tulsa. We sat in line to pull into this cul-de-sac for like an hour, and we get out, and they're all like, "Yeah, Christmas." And I'm just thinking, this looks like a giant fire hazard. We wonder why there's global warming, and it's because that thing, it puts off a lot of heat. But we went to like some living nativity thing, and they had the Virgin Mary, who was like 85 and had Coke bottle glasses, and you had to pay like $10 to get in. Come see the newborn king, but pay your $10 first. And it's like nothing that we seem to do really put me in the Christmas spirit. And I was looking for the Christmas spirit everywhere, but in the Bible, just reading the Christmas story. And I think Nathanael, I was stressing out so much over what Christmas isn't, I almost missed what Christmas is. And I think Nathanael here, he stresses out so much over where Jesus is from and maybe what Jesus isn't, that he almost misses who Jesus really is. So from now on, we're calling Nathanael poor little Nathanael, because he is the one who is too depressed to be blessed, and he almost misses the blessings of Jesus. But Christmas is depressing for me, and I know for a lot of people, and that's very ironic, because it is billed as like the most wonderful time of the year. We wish you a Merry Christmas, give us figgy pudding, peace on earth, goodwill to men. And but oftentimes it's like, it's anything but that most wonderful time of the year. And I know for me, like I said, I'm not super huge into Christmas, but I love Charlie Brown Christmas, the little like half-hour, cartoon that's been running for like 50 years. And I identify very personally with that because in that, he makes the statement, I know that nobody likes me anyway, so why do we have to have a holiday to celebrate that? And I identify very personally with that. So Christmas is oftentimes kind of depressing. And I can really only stand about 48 hours of Christmas. So like last year, it was like for a month we were doing Christmas stuff and nothing put me in the Christmas spirit. And it's, like 10 o'clock the night of the 23rd to 10 o'clock the night of the 25th is when I have Christmas. Because every year since I was in like 8th grade, on 10 o'clock the night of the 23rd, I watch Ben-Hur. And that's if you don't watch Ben-Hur, it's not Christmas. So I have like 48 hours of Christmas, go to bed the night of the 25th, you wake up the next morning, okay, Christmas is over. Like today, it's not Christmas. This needs to go. It's not Christmas. But Christmas is depressing, and I found that one of the main reasons it's depressing is because school is out. And that's very ironic, because anyone who knows me knows that I kind of hate school. And I'm always complaining about how I just want to graduate, or I just want to drop out, or I just want to like wake up and, already be in heaven. But, I really hate school, but, when school is out, it's just boring. It's fun for like 3 days. The first 3 days you can sleep as much as you want. You can eat whatever you want to when mom and dad foot the grocery bill. You can, you can play video games whenever you want. And then, like the 4th day, I'm just staring at my ceiling like there's nothing to do. There's no books to read. There's no papers to write. There's no test to study for, and there's nothing. And I found that there are 3 things that I miss during Christmas break that make me kind of sad, depressed, I guess. I don't think that is the tagline that I put when I originally wrote this sermon. So I'm not sure what's going to be on the screen, but it is 3 things that I missed during Christmas break. So first is something to do. So this is probably the biggest reason why it's boring and depressing is that there's nothing to do. Like I said, there's no papers to write. There's no test to study for. I'm just staring at the ceiling. And that's not really good for a man. I guess that's not good for anyone, but that's especially not good for a man. A whole man's purpose is like wrapped up in work. Like you meet a guy and the first 2 questions you ask are like, what's your name and what do you do for a living? I can't wait till I reach that point. Right now it's 4 questions. What's your name? Are you in college? What's your major? And what do you want to do with that? So it takes 4 questions, but after you reach about 25, people assume, you either graduated, flunked out, or just didn't go, so they just skip straight to the last question. But, a man's whole purpose is wrapped up in like what he does, work. The old saying, if you don't have something to do, the devil will find you something to do. Well, it's not necessarily as much that as much as, a man's whole identity is wrapped up in having something to do. If you go your whole life and you look back and you've done absolutely nothing but just sit on the couch and draw welfare, you probably feel like you've just wasted your entire life. And I guess at that point you have. But, Jesus didn't give Philip an identity completely independent of anything. Jesus didn't just sort of like go up to Philip and he's like, you are now a disciple. You now have a fulfilling life and you now have meaning and purpose, right? He didn't just sort of like snap his fingers and all of a sudden, Philip feels like he's lived a fulfilling life. And that's not really the way that it works for us either. Our identity is wrapped up in Jesus, but that isn't independent of actually following Jesus. Jesus tells Philip to follow me, and it is through that Philip has an identity and meaning and purpose and some sort of fulfillment in life. Verse 46 is where we see poor little Nathaniel. And, he says, Nathaniel said to Philip, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And what does Philip say? He just says, come and see, right? Nathaniel is the embodiment of the too depressed to be blessed persona. And interestingly enough, out of the two of them, Philip and Nathaniel, it seems like Nathaniel needed something to do worse than Philip. We don't really know what Philip was doing when Jesus called him, but it says Nathaniel, he was just chilling. He was just sitting under a tree. Not really working, not really any cares in the world. He's just sitting under a tree. So Nathaniel probably needed to, have someone to follow and have something to do more than Philip, and Nathaniel's the one, pouting and can anything good come out of Nazareth? And it's important to remember that Jesus hasn't just saved us from something, but he saved us to something. So it's not just Jesus has, forgiven us our sins and, we can go to heaven, but that Jesus has actually given us a job to do here on earth. Now, let me tell you, if you ever get bored in life, just follow God. And if you ever get bored in life following God, then surrender to the ministry, because it is anything but boring. You are without hearth and home. You got no friends. You got no money. You're moving around from city to city and state to state. It's anything but boring. It's depressing sometimes, but it's not boring. Our identity in Christ is never removed from our job in Christ. And that seems to be a misunderstanding that a lot of people have today. So I guess people have always struggled with, like, our identity is found in Christ. It seems like especially in my generation growing up, that was like the big, hot issue. Lifeway was really pumping it out. Like all of the books, all of the sermon series, all the podcasts, all of the movies and the music. It's all, our identity is found in Christ. And that's true, but if you really read some of these books, we're not really doing people a whole lot of favors. There seems to be this misunderstanding that Jesus just sort of hands out identity like candy. It doesn't really work that way for salvation. If a guy just sort of walks an aisle, says a prayer, gets dunked in a tub, and never follows Jesus at all, we're the frozen chosen. We're smart enough to know, right, that guy's not really saved. And it doesn't really work that way for any sort of fulfilling life either. Jesus just doesn't sort of hand it out like cotton candy and say, you now have a fulfilling life. But he says, follow me, and through that, you'll have a fulfilling life. God just doesn't supernaturally give us meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in life. And you cannot cheat code your way into heaven. Now, I realize that some people, their understanding of video games is Pong. So I'm going to try to break this down as quickly as I can. Video game developers, I guess they still do this, but back in the 80s when they made games, they would have these codes that they could use, and they could test one part of a game without having to play through the entire game. So they could, if they just wanted to test level 3, but they didn't want to play level 1 and 2, they could just put in this code and be at level 3 and just test level 3 of the game. So for whatever reason, they didn't bother to take these out of games when they just shipped them out to market. And so people found this, and I guess had too much time on their hands and just went through every possible combination and found out what the codes were. And then you could brag to your friends that you beat Mario Kart without actually having to play through the game because you just entered the code and, hey, look, I won the game. But you don't really get any fulfillment out of that because you didn't actually play through the game and beat it. And it's the same way in life. We can't really just cheat code our way into heaven and, not actually follow Jesus or do anything worthwhile and, get to heaven and feel like, I've lived a fulfilling, meaningful life. It doesn't really work that way. We need something to do, and we need something or somebody to be. So I guess really this point should be somebody to be like or somebody to look up to, but for the sake of alliterating the 3 points, it's somebody to be. In verse 45, Philip is really hyping up Jesus. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Philip is going up to Nathanael. We found the guy. We found the one. Moses wrote about him. The prophets wrote about him. And he's really hyping him up. And, we kind of are or making fun of Nathaniel a little bit. But to give him some credit, right? If some guy came up to me, he's like, dude, we found this guy, and he's so cool and so amazing, and like all this, I'd probably be like, okay, yeah, sure. I probably wouldn't necessarily believe it anyway, because anyone can talk a big game. Anyone can talk about, oh, look at this guy, he's so cool or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily believe that this guy is all this and that either. And just as Jesus doesn't give purpose devoid of something to do, he doesn't give purpose devoid of somebody to be. So follow me is be like me. And another one of the reasons why Christmas break is so depressing is that I feel like I don't have anybody to be. And so what I mean by that is not necessarily like, oh, I'm not popular or something like that, but I feel like I'm not making an impact on the world by just sitting at home playing video games for 12 hours a day. I'm not really being anybody important. And this is, again, every person, but I think specifically like every man has somebody in their life that they like idolize or somebody that they like really look up to. And for a lot of guys, that's their dad or like a Mr. Miyagi father figure type or something. But, the thing is, we don't just like look up to this guy and we're like, wow, he's smart or he's, well off financially or whatever. We all really want to be that guy, right? And it's not just like we want to, dress like him or we want to have, money like him, but he has done something in the world and somehow made an impact, and we want to be like him and make an impact too, right? This guy, even if it's just, this guy's impacted my life, I want to be like that and I want to impact someone else's life. And, I kind of had like I don't know if I'm using this right or not, but I'm just going to say it, like existential crisis over break, because I'm sitting in my room staring at the ceiling, and it dawned on me, I will never be famous. And I guess that's one of those things that I've always kind of known in the back of my head, that I will never be famous. But, I'm like sitting there listening to like the Beach Boys or something, and it dawned on me, I will never be a Beach Boy. And, that hit hard, and that was depressing. And, it's not necessarily that I want to look like a Beach Boy. I don't want to wear like a pinstripe shirt, have a surfboard over my shoulder, sing like, 5 octaves too high for my voice range. But, I'll never like write a best-selling song. I'll never write a best-selling book. I'll never, like draw a painting that's like hanging, in the Tulsa Art Gallery. I don't know. I'll never do something that like really matters to the world. And that was really depressing for me, probably more so than it should have been. And it's, like I said, it's not necessarily about looking the part of like a famous person, but leaving an impact on the world. And ultimately, that's why people do anything, right? Money is a part of it, but ultimately the reason people create art or music or whatever is that they want to leave an impact on the world and feel like they've left their mark on the world. Everybody wants to be somebody in this world. And so, when Jesus says, follow me, it isn't just look the part. It's not just, walk everywhere you go, perform miracles, talk in a bunch of parables, but, you can leave your mark on the world and you can actually matter. And Philip and Nathaniel could be somebody because Jesus was somebody. Outside of Jesus, they probably, no one would know or care 2,000 years later who these two people were. They would just live and die and do nothing. I mean, there'd be no record of them. But because of Jesus, they were somebody and they left an impact on this world. And so, how do we know that Jesus actually was somebody? Well, Philip hypes him up. We found the one, we found the guy, and, we have, poor little Nathaniel, and he's being all depressed and mopey. And, what does Philip do? Does he, pull out like his systematic textbook okay, chapter 3, all the reasons why Jesus is a cool guy. And he goes like, point by point. Does he get into like some sort of formalized debate? No, he's just like, well, just come and see. Just check it out, see for yourself. And that's how you know Jesus really was somebody, you don't have to like debate about, how, great Jesus is. You're just like, well, just come see for yourself. On top of that, Nathaniel starts to get hyped, and he's like, you're, the Son of God, you're the Messiah, and, what does Jesus say? He's like, yes, that was very impressive of me that I saw you sitting under the tree. No, he's just like, you thought that was impressive, that I saw you under a tree? Like, that's nothing. And my grandpa used to say, I don't know that I ever necessarily heard him say this, but my dad has told me that he said, my grandpa used to say, people that are really a big deal don't have to constantly talk about what a big deal they actually are. It's just known that they're a big deal. And that's the way that Jesus was. So Jesus really was like somebody. And this is the person that like you want to look up to and like you want to be like Jesus. And you can't really have a meaningful life devoid of being somebody and mattering to the world, right? If you just kind of like, do your 9 to 5 and, after like 40 years retire, you look back, you're like, well, what, I guess I lived and I worked and I died, but like, no one's going to remember me. It's very much like Ecclesiastes, and it's just very depressing to think about. So you can't really have any sort of meaningful life devoid of mattering to the world. Every man needs to accomplish something in life. There's no sideline sitters. There's no pew warmers. We actually get to be somebody because Jesus is somebody, right? We get to follow Christ and leave an impact on the world, Christ's impact on the world. And that's the key. And, we get to be somebody, and that's not like riches or health or wealth or whatever, but we get to impact the world for better. And that's what it's all about. And people are looking everywhere for like, their like father figure or whatever, Like here's the thing. I'm just going to let you in on a secret. You can't be your dad, and you can't be like Elvis or whoever, Like, I could paint my hair gray, and, and I could wear button-downs like everywhere I go. I could go to Six Flags in a button-down, and I could get some big, Coke bottle glasses. Like, I love you too, Dad. And, but like, I'll never actually be my dad, Like, I could sing well. I could, outsell Elvis. I could wear goofier outfits than Elvis, but you can never really be Elvis. But with Jesus, you can be like Jesus. You obviously can't be Jesus, but you can be like Jesus. And, you can matter because Jesus matters. And at the end of your life, you don't feel like you've just wasted your life and done nothing. You can actually matter. And that's all you have to do. You just have to come and see, and just see for yourself what a fulfilling life Jesus can give you. So you need something to do, you need somebody to be, and then you need somewhere to go. So every man needs somewhere to go. Again, this point is probably a little bit misleading, but we got to have the alliterated 3 points because we're good Baptists. And so this isn't necessarily like physical location. This is, you need to know that your life is ultimately headed somewhere. You need to know that your life has direction, and that you're not just sort of like floating around, wandering through life, the sun has risen, the sun has set, and Parker ain't done nothing yet. You need to know that your life is actually headed somewhere. And you don't want to just wake up one day and, you're like 80 years old and you have nothing to show for those 80 years. And this is sort of like the end result, I guess, of the last 2 points. So if you have nothing to do and you have nobody to be, your life ain't going anywhere. But if you have something to do and you are somebody, then your life is going somewhere and you have direction. So like during Christmas break, my life's not really headed anywhere. And it's very depressing because, I guess like ultimately I'm headed towards graduation, but I'm not like actively doing anything to bring that closer. I'm not like reading any books or taking any classes or taking any tests. I'm just playing video games and sleeping and eating. And so, right, I feel like my life's not really headed anywhere and I don't have any direction and I'm just sort of floating. In verse 51, this is Jesus speaking to Nathanael. He says, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." And Jesus is saying here that he's the way to heaven. Basically, I mean, that's what that verse is saying. And so, I mean, it like in the immediate sense, that's like salvation and like forgiveness of sins. But more than that, it's all tied into like meaning and purpose. So, like, follow me, I'll give you something to do. I'll give you a job to do. Follow me, I'll give you somebody to be because I'm somebody. Follow me, I'll give you somewhere to go, which is heaven. And that ultimately gives your life direction. When you get to heaven, you hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." You don't have to look back and wonder if your life was wasted or not. You don't have to look back and wonder if you were just sort of floating around, doing nothing. You just spent 80 years sitting under a tree. And I think ultimately that's what every man fears most. They say that the number one fear is death. I don't necessarily think that that's true because I'm not really afraid of death in and of itself. Like, I'm not afraid to get shot in the head in and of like getting shot in the head because I'll probably like die instantly and not feel any pain. I'm not a doctor. I'm hoping that's how it works, but like dying in and of itself doesn't terrify me, but like dying and then, oh, I've accomplished like nothing with my life, like that terrifies me. So I think, that's probably like every man, I guess everybody's greatest fear is not necessarily death, but like wasting your life, missing opportunities, looking back with regret, that sort of thing. So just as following Jesus will give you somebody to be because of who Jesus is, following Jesus will give you somewhere to go because of who Jesus is. Imagine how much more, we're giving Nathaniel a hard time, but imagine how much more depressed he would be had he missed Jesus. Nah, I think I'm just going to keep sitting under this tree, and years go by and years go by, and then, he's an old man and he looks back and, I've done nothing but sit under this tree. Maybe I should have followed that carpenter guy. Think of how much more depressing his life would be had he missed Jesus. And he looked back and realized he's kind of accomplished nothing. The solution to too depressed to be blessed isn't to just change your thinking or realign your chakras or whatever, but it's to have Jesus change your life. And that's ultimately the solution. I'm not a history guy, so I'm going to make a very bold statement, but every great leader that people look up to in history gave his people something to do. So, again, I'm not a history guy, but like FDR, it wasn't necessarily vote for me. That was the Great Depression guy, right? Okay. See, I'm not a history guy. But FDR wasn't necessarily vote for me and it'll change your life, but vote for me and I'll give you a job to do, right? So I'm assuming he did a lot of this too, but in the history books, he's not recorded as just passing out like $20 bills, You get a 20 and you get a 20 and everyone goes home with a 20 as much as it is he's remembered for like the New Deal and like, they built like roads and houses and, whatever, and he put the people to work. And that's ultimately what he's remembered for. And, like people my grandparents' age who are like dead or dying off, some of you might be that age in this church, and I apologize for that. But, they look back and they see change, not because they voted him in, but because he put the people to work. And it sort of revived that American spirit that had been lost in the Depression. And, they don't look back and just see, we voted him in and he just, was shipping truckloads of money to our house every day. But we voted him in and he gave us a job to do. And it's the same way when you look back on a life of following God, you're not going to see that he just handed you the keys to heaven and said, well done, my good and faithful servant. But he actually gave you a job to do. And that's why heaven and well done, my good and faithful servant actually means something, is we didn't just, like I say, like cheat code our way into heaven, but we actually have something to do here in the meantime to do. You know, and there seems to be this idea that like, you know, earth is terrible and I'm just waiting for like the second coming, or I'm just waiting for my death. And we're like so completely removed from this world that like we're not actually making an impact, right? Well, you can't have like any sort of fulfilling life that way. And really, I'm not sure you're being a good servant that way. You know, Jesus doesn't just sort of hand us the keys to heaven, but he gives us a job to do here. And that's why heaven actually means so much. You never know how faithful you are until you're given an opportunity to not be faithful. So I know my dad has used this example before, but like with kids, you never know how good of a kid you got until he has an opportunity to not be a good kid. So, you know, and this isn't anybody in this church and not even anybody in the state. But like I've known kids and parents where they're always like, oh, I got such a great kid. My kid's so well behaved, you know. And, you know, at the time they were, you know, I mean, they never caused any trouble or anything. But, you know, but they never really had an opportunity to be anything but a good kid. You know, these are like the extreme helicopter parents, you know, like you can have a steak, but we're going to put it in a blender because you might choke to death. Like that level of hyper parenting. And then, you know, we all sort of go off to college, excuse me, and you hear a story from someone. You know, oh, did you hear what you know so and so did? You're like, that can't be the case. You know, that's the good kid. That's the perfect kid. You know, and you hear another story, and it's from someone else. You hear something else and something else, and finally, you know, you figure out that they're more crazy than the kid raised by the liberal hippie. You know, like they're just completely off the wall, and they're like the worst kid at the college. And you know, you wonder, well, how can that be? They're supposed to be, you know, the good kid. They're the, you know, the good boy, the good girl. And well, you never really know how good of a kid you got until they have an opportunity to be anything but a good kid. And in the same way, you never really know what kind of disciple you got until they got an opportunity to not be a good disciple. You know, Nathaniel, you know, he had the opportunity to not follow Jesus. He had the opportunity to just keep sitting under that tree, doing whatever. But Jesus said, follow me, Philip. Follow me, Nathaniel. And you won't feel like you've wasted your life. Your life will ultimately be headed somewhere, right? It'll be headed towards heaven. And that will actually mean something because I'm giving you a job to do here. And that's ultimately a meaningful life. That's not a life that's wasted. And that's one that you're truly blessed. Not just because, oh, I'm blessed because I made it to heaven, but I'm blessed because I help people get there. And I have a job here on earth. So if you're too depressed to be blessed this Christmas, that's a tongue twister. If you're too depressed to be blessed this Christmas, then just come and see for yourself, right? Follow Jesus and let him ultimately speak for himself, because he will give you meaning and purpose, and it's through that meaning that you will be blessed. And, you know, like I said, Christmas is depressing for a lot of people. You know, there's something about Christmas. People tend to die at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And I don't know why that is, but I know Christmas is depressing for a lot of people. And, you know, it's depressing for me because there's no school. And everyone needs, ultimately, something to do, someone to be, and somewhere to go. And really, what that boils down to, if you just sum it up in, like, you know, one sentence, nobody wants to live a wasted life. And that's basically the summary of this. You know, we give poor Nathaniel a hard time, but, you know, sometimes we're not that much better. And so, you know, if you feel like surely nothing good can come out of Christmas, then just come and see for yourself and let Jesus speak for himself. And the best way to overcome the sadness of nothing to do and no one to be and nowhere to go is to just follow Jesus, because he'll put you to work, and he is somebody, and you can be somebody because of him. And he'll give you like direction in your life. And if you've been doing all of those things and you're, I know this is like the Frozen Chosen Sunday night crowd. So if you've been doing all those things for 50 years and you're just sitting back, wow, Jesus is so cool and he's done all this stuff in my life, you ain't seen nothing yet, basically. If there's, and that's what Jesus is saying, basically. If you're impressed by that, you're impressed by the fact that I saw you sitting under a tree, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? You're about to see, heaven open and the angels descending upon the Son of Man. So that's basically it. If you don't have any sort of meaning in your life, then just come and see and let Jesus speak for himself. And if you do, great. There's a lot more. You ain't seen nothing yet. So with that, let's pray.